Why did Jesus say Revelation would happen soon? Well, it's not what you've been told and not what you expect. In the very first verses of the book of Revelation, Jesus told the Apostle John that these things in the book would happen, quote, soon. Now, John wrote Revelation back in AD 96. So what in the world did Jesus mean when he said soon? Either he had some explaining to do, or there is something about Revelation that you are not being told. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and there is something very important about Revelation that you're not being told. In fact, it is a key to understanding the book, but most scholars miss this completely. But before we explain this, let me tell you that you aren't the only one with this question. Now, back in the early church, this was not such a big deal because John had just written the book. So, they weren't too worried because Jesus said soon, and they were watching for him. Soon was soon. But as the years turned into decades, turned into centuries, the church realized their idea of soon and Jesus' idea of soon were very different things. Folks began to ask, Jesus said his return was soon, so where is he? Was Jesus a, gasp, false prophet? So the leaders of a church in those days had to answer these questions. They came up with a theory then called preterism or historicism, that Revelation was actually already fulfilled back in the first century, that Jesus had already come. That solves the soon problem, but not very well because it's false. There are so many things in Revelation that obviously haven't happened yet. Demon locusts of the fifth seal haven't been released and haven't stung every unbeliever on earth, causing so much pain that they long to die, but can't. That hasn't happened. No one would argue that. This is an incredibly specific prophecy. So the preterist answer to that is, well, it's all symbolic, but it can't be. What would long to die but can't be symbolic of? Then there's the very next trumpet, the sixth trumpet, where 200 million angels riding horses with lions' heads pour out fire and brimstone on the earth and kill a third of the population of the world. Preterists, care to tell me what that symbolizes other than the real thing? And when did a third of the earth's population get killed in a single event involving fire and brimstone? Then there's a third of the earth burning up in fire, ice, and blood. Nope, I don't remember that happening in my history books either. Or a third of all fresh water being poisoned by a star, or a flaming mountain being cast into the sea, or peace being taken from the earth. When was the earth ever at peace to have peace taken from them? On and on and on Revelation goes. These things have never happened. So the preterist and historicist answer, it just doesn't fit. We can eliminate that. Those who realized that the preterist answer was wrong then had to come up with another answer. The easy one was that soon doesn't mean soon. It actually means something else, like maybe quickly. When Jesus' return begins, when the end times begin, all of this will happen all at once, quickly. And you want to know something? In Revelation 1:1, the word translated as tacos doesn't mean soon. It actually does mean quickly or in haste. It's not those type of tacos, by the way. It's tacos. But the Greek word isn't the real answer. Because in verse 3, it says this, "Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near." Okay, so Jesus doubles down on the time being near. And this time, it isn't a translation issue. In Greek, the word near means close in time or in place, just like it does in English. Near means near. Some will say, yes, but Jesus is always near to us. But that is not what the verse says. It says time. The time of Revelation is near. This is much harder for someone to slide around. The majority opinion on this phrase leaves a lot to be desired. Here's one scholarly opinion from Pastor John Piper. Good guy, but he doesn't quite get it. He has set in motion an end-time process. We are in the last days. We have been for 2,000 years. And therefore Jesus is like a king, standing with his army outside the city, waiting to take it captive. Nothing can stand between him and that capture except his own choice. End of quote. That answers that Jesus is near, but not that the time is near. And Revelation makes this specific claim that the time is near. Sure, to God a day is like 1,000 years, but we're not God. And this was addressed to humans. Saying near is very deceptive if that is what God meant. So what would you think that the time is near means? Probably like the early church, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years maybe, but certainly not 1900 years. So we have eliminated most ideas about what Jesus meant and found them to be very lacking. Jesus must have meant that his return truly was within a few years to the people he was talking to, not maybe to us. So who was Jesus and the angel who dictated this talking to? Well, to the Apostle John and his audience. Who was that audience? Well, John and also the people he would send the book of Revelation to, right? That's his audience, who he would send it to. Is it possible that these people were actually going to be living within 5 to 10 years of the return of Jesus? Could it be that the revelation was not really meant for you and me? Is it possible that although it's a blessing to everyone who reads it, we learned that in the first couple verses of Revelation as well, that it really isn't for us, but for a future group who will live through the events in the book of Revelation. We're going to prove this to you from the scriptures in just a moment, that it is exactly what it is. But think about this for a moment first. Who really needs the book of Revelation? Certainly it's an encouragement to all of us that our blessed hope Jesus will return, and whatever was wrong with this world, he will make right. The good guys are rewarded, the bad guys are punished. That's an encouragement. But who really needs the book? Only those who are going to live through the events of the book. Who really needs to know what the first seal of Revelation is all about? There have been arguments about it for generations. Oh, it's Jesus, some say. It's the Antichrist. Others say it's the church. It's Saddam Hussein. Yes, there's actually someone out there who has proposed that. But those who are dead and gone really don't need to know what the first seal was going to be. Billy Graham is the one who proposed it was the Antichrist. And being in his eternal reward right now, he probably found out. Jesus says, oh yeah, you weren't really correct about that. But, he didn't need to know it when he was on the earth because he's already gone. But those who see the first seal, the second seal, the third seal, need to know the challenges and Jesus' instructions, his specific instructions for those times. And that is who Jesus was writing to. Who is John instructed to send this book to? Who is that group? I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet saying, write in a book what you see, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. So if these 7 churches are just the 7 historic churches that existed back in the first century, or 7 church ages, this means absolutely nothing. But what if the 7 churches are not just the historic churches, but rather they were a symbol of 7 real churches that actually are going to be in the tribulation or the 70th week of Daniel and experience the book of Revelation, all the events in Revelation. And then Jesus was 100% correct when he said the time of these events would be near. Near to that group, but maybe not to us. Certainly not to Billy Graham, certainly not to first century Christians. And if you think about it, what else could Jesus really have meant by the time is near? It's almost proof. It's almost proof that the 7 churches that John sent Revelation to, that on Jesus' instruction, are in the tribulation. But that isn't the only proof. In 6 of the 7 letters, there are allusions to the tribulation period. In the letter to Ephesus, Pergamum, Thyatira, and Sardis, Jesus says he will come to them. That sounds like his coming, doesn't it? In the letter to Ephesus, he comes and takes away their lampstand. In Pergamum, it is to fight against them with the sword of his mouth, something that he only does at Armageddon. In Thyatira, he throws the unrepentant into great tribulation and asks the others to hold fast until he comes. That's end time too, isn't it? And in Sardis, he warns the unrepentant that he will come to them like a thief. You know, a thief in the night? Unless they are watchful and awake. In Philadelphia, he says he's coming quickly and will keep them from the hour of trial. And many think that's the rapture. We do as well. And in the letter of Laodicea, he promises the repentant that he will come to them and dine with them. Notice how these 5 letters all stress Jesus coming from heaven to them. These aren't letters about the past or even the recent past. They're letters about the end or close to the end of the 70th week of Daniel. So if you hear that Revelation only mentions the church in Revelation 2 and 3, and not after that, you've probably heard that proof, and that this is some kind of proof of a rapture before the tribulation. Remind those folks, or even yourself, about all these allusions to the 7 churches being in the tribulation, right up to the return of Jesus. 6 of 7 of the letters have those references, as we just showed you. What this means, then, is that the letters to the 7 churches are instructions to the church, at least the church alive and on the earth during the tribulation, on how to respond to the events swirling around them. When Jesus said the time was near and these things would happen soon, it was these churches he was referring to and instructing. That means these specific instructions are to be followed during that time. At the end of this video, we have a link to another video about all 7 of the churches of Revelation that goes over these instructions, who these churches are, because I'm sure you're wondering, which one of these churches am I in? If I'm going to obey Jesus' instructions, which one should I obey? This is where watching this future video that I'll be posting is so important, because there are 2 possibilities in the end time churches. Choice 1 is that all 7 churches are on the earth for all 7 years. They exist at the same time, and believers are in one church or another. Choice 2 is the churches are sequential. They happen one after another. Church 1 is first, then church 2, then church 3, etc. And this is what we believe occurs, that they're not all on the earth at the same time, but rather, first church is all the believers who are still alive in that church. Then, when something else happens, it's the second church, then the third, and people are moving from church to church as events pass in Revelation. So Ephesus is first, Smyrna is second, Pergamum is third, etc. And we discuss why we think that is the case in that video we mentioned. And in our book, Revelation Deciphered, we extensively discuss what we call the pattern of 7 events, which are the 7 seals. We have a link down in the description below this video if you want to pick a copy up of that book. So in a nutshell, the first seal is the false peace of the covenant with the many, which possibly, could be signed as soon as the fall on the Feast of Trumpets. The text says that what the believers in this church do well is identify the false apostles. In the Hebrew version of Revelation, which I personally really like a little better than the Greek version, it calls them false prophets. This matches then what Jesus said in Matthew 24, 4-5 about false prophets coming during the beginning of birth pangs period, false prophets who in Jeremiah cry peace when there is no peace. So it appears they're going to be false prophets saying this covenant with the many is a peace covenant that really is a peace. Jesus wants us to know they're wrong. They're false prophets. But what does Jesus say they don't do well in that first church? It's that they have left their first love. What is their first love? The greatest commandment, love God and love others. So what we as believers need to concentrate on is identifying the false prophets who will be claiming the covenant with the many is a good thing, helping others identify this too, and also getting back to our first love of God and others, living out the greatest commandment of loving God and others. Now, if the first seal breaks and the covenant with the many is signed in the fall, it's game on. Every churchgoer is going to need to know how to react, what to do to overcome the seals, which are going to happen one after another quickly, as Jesus told us they would happen. The time to begin to prepare for these things is right now. When the seals open, it's going to be too late for many who are unprepared. So if it was me, I'd pick up that copy of Revelation Deciphered and start studying. But if you prefer to our video on the 7 seals of Revelation is very popular, and you're going to see why. Click right here to keep watching. See why the 7 churches are in the tribulation, what believers who are alive then need to be doing, and some other things we haven't talked about yet. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.